Morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're jumping in from. John, I know it's morning where you are, probably about noon for me. So, yeah, excited to get started on this live stream today. A little bit of a change, right? Typically, we stick to the design stuff, right? The UI UX, but thought we could change it up this time and focus maybe more on custom widgets, functions, actions, which typically we don't talk about too much, right? Because obviously it's outside of like the native FlutterFlow widgets.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And I think this is a great idea because we're gonna look at some practical examples. And I think a lot of times, you can hear about these like powerful functionalities, but you're like, I don't know, man, just like give me some examples, some like real world of like how I would use this just to kind of get the juices going. So I think we can get some juices going today.
Nice. Yes. No, I'm excited, and I think too, it'll encourage people to hopefully maybe explore pub dev a little bit more. I think that's something that in the new marketplace that we're working on for FlutterFlow, that'll be more utilized. I think right now, right, it's somewhat confusing here and there how you're seeing like everything kind of packaged together. So yeah, I'm excited to see in the future like how custom code will be kind of integrated into the FlutterFlow ecosystem. So
Well, and we're in this like really cool place now where like the difference between like no code and code is kind of gray, right? Because we've got all these systems like our integration with GPT for like producing your own code. But then even on that, so it's like if your code doesn't work, so for instance, I earlier this year I needed a Google Sheets script. And so I was just like, "Oh, let's see if GPT can write this." And so I asked it and it wrote it. It was like I wanted to grab a bunch of videos from a YouTube channel, and so I put it in. It gave me a script. I put it in there, and it didn't work. And then I said, "Hey, it's not working. Here's the error," and then it fixed it. So it's like the whole life cycle. It's like even if it doesn't work, it's not just like, oh, you try this one thing and it breaks, but it's like the troubleshooting too, and code explanation. So maybe like no one's a perfect coder, right? So you say, I have like a year of Python or Dart under my, and you'd be like, okay, so maybe I know like half of this code, but then you can like ask GPT questions, which like I'm doing all the time, right? And so it's kind of this cool place that we're in where that sort of like distance is like gray.
yep, exactly. I think one of the things I find myself constantly doing when I'm writing this custom code is exactly what you said. Like not only describing what I want, but ask after the AI, outputs what I'm looking for. I'll sometimes just start a brand new chat. So it ideally has no history or knowledge behind what it just, output. And then I ask, what does this function do? Just to make sure, like, is it truly outputting the requested actions or whatever it may be. So yeah, there's
Yeah,
tons of
that
different.
that's a good point, and this has become big in like the LangChain space too, where it's like, okay, you've got your whole flow of how you're using your language model, but then you have all this like QA at the other end, so you can use these models to essentially like QA like the stuff that's output from the models,
Yeah.
which is like so
It's a
cool.
dangerous game, right? It's a dangerous,
Yeah, 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 dude. Once.
almost Turing complete, I would argue, right? Is it Turing complete? Is that what, right? We're working towards as languages?
Yeah.
Nothing Turing
Yeah, yeah,
complete.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That's funny. Yeah. But it's cool because it's because I feel like a lot of times, and I made this joke a little while ago where it's like, oh, our kids are never gonna know like chat bots before GPT when they were like just a dumpster fire, and like you didn't even use them because you're like they're not gonna say anything. And now it's like not only are they usable, but you can like QA them by themselves, and so be like, hey,
Mhm.
check this. Is this right? So here's another hot GPT tip I've been doing. So if you're a paid user of ChatGPT and you have access, you got to go into the settings, but you can have access to web browsing with GPT. What you can do is you can do whatever you're doing, and then because its knowledge only goes up to September 2021, you can I'll say it'll give me some answer, and then I'll say, hey, check the internet to make sure that's true. And then it'll go out and you get like a little box in there that's like it shows you what it's doing. You know, like I'm going to this website, I'm clicking on this link, and then it'll come back and it'll say, oh yes, that's true, or actually no, there was an update here, and so here's the updated information, which I found is like a helpful technique.
Nice. Yeah, that's really smart. I haven't utilized that, but yeah, like checking, that's a good way to check and or somewhat verify, right? With some level of accuracy. That's really interesting.
Well,
Yeah, I
well,
remember. Go ahead.
oh no, I was saying I wanted to build this Chrome extension, but its data is I tried it with like an early but its knowledge because there's like a manifest v3 which is
Hmm.
the sort of best practices, and Chrome extension like docs are constantly being updated, and so
Yeah.
it's a perfect example of something where it's like its knowledge is just too out of date, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember having that exact same issue, having to look through like Stack Overflow because exactly right. It would always do like manifest v1 or
Oh yeah, yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But yeah, I remember last year about this time I was working with Google Dialogflow, if you're familiar, or it was
Is that
actually
like
about
voice
like
flow?
what was that?
Is it like voice flow where you like making like voice bot thingies?
No, so actually it wasn't last year. It was probably like 3 years ago, and I was using it to auto detect sentiment from LinkedIn messages because at that point I was
Okay.
doing LinkedIn automation, and so I would get these messages back from users, and I'd want to see like what the user was feeling, right? Was it a positive message, negative? And yeah, I remember using Google Dialogflow, and it was like so frustrating because you had to like identify the exact key phrase that would be used to
Oh,
detect some of
got
the
it.
sentiment,
Yeah.
right? And it was like so frustrating. And now, sure enough, like 2 years later, right, I could use ChatGPT, I could use 3.5, right, and get like an answer instantly from sentiment, and or not even like I don't even need to use
Yeah.
the chat model. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely funny to see the evolution of things, and um, obviously that ties into FlutterFlow, right? To see the evolution of how we implement ChatGPT into FlutterFlow and these AI features that are becoming increasingly available. We have an exciting kind of announcement that we'll be pushing out on socials and on different mediums next week. So stay tuned for that. We're really excited. Ideally Monday of next week. But yeah, I mean, in the meantime, we can kind of chat about custom code in FlutterFlow. Also, maybe showing some examples of using the OpenAI codex, which we are actually updating, from my understanding, to utilizing. Is it the 3.5 version 3.5 of
Yeah. Yeah.
ChatGPT?
Yeah. So we were kind of early in the code gen, and OpenAI had this codex that was specifically for code. But now we just have a better. I mean, ChatGPT is a better model, and so we're updating our code generation to that.
Nice. Yeah. So that's really exciting. And hopefully that should come maybe today, maybe next week. But yeah, with that said, we can jump right into maybe a FlutterFlow project today. Again, really the goal here is just to explore what custom code additions look like in FlutterFlow, right? So writing custom code, maybe some inspiration, types of custom functions, actions, widgets you might use, or maybe give you some ideas as well as what you could try to create at your
Now
project.
these are like code snippets that you have used in your projects, right? So these are real. We didn't invent these.
Yes, yeah. Some of these are marketplace items, which
Okay.
are cool. So I'll definitely make sure to like make that clear to the best of my ability. But yeah, so super excited to share some of these, and some I've kind of worked on myself. And I have just a few, but obviously I also want to take advantage of the codex to show everyone who maybe hasn't used that yet what that experience is like. Um, So yeah, we're in a FlutterFlow project. This is blank right now.
Yeah, can we?
And
I think we got to share it.
what was that?
We got to
Oh,
turn
I gotta
on.
share the screen.
Yeah,
You're right.
dude, I
Cool.
forget that all the time.
Cool. Let me bump this up too. There we go. Cool. So yeah, I'm in this empty project, right? And if you are new to FlutterFlow, to access the custom code area, you're going to click on this icon down here, and you'll see custom code where there's three sections. Technically four. One isn't really for generating custom code in the main.dart file, so you're probably going to spend most of your time in custom functions, widgets, and actions, right? Personally, I actually haven't created as many custom functions since we've added the Dart expressions. I don't know. Do you use those a lot, John? I know I find myself, I pretty much moved like all my custom functions over to expressions after
Yeah,
that
that's
came out.
yeah, that's a great. Do you want to just show that real quick, and I can talk
Yeah,
over while you're showing this?
for sure.
That's a great point. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I've done have moved over there, and the reason is that a lot of times stuff you're doing with custom functions is like small. I mean, literally an expression, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing one like transformation, and and that's why we built these code expressions, because a lot of the times people are just doing like little things, and so like, yo, you don't have to do all of this stuff over here. We just need like a simple expression, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so for a perfect example of that is like adding a number together, right? You would never like I wouldn't write a custom function just to add numbers. So in this case, a perfect example is say we had like a counter on the screen, right? And we needed to, instead of using like increment or some of the other predetermined options we have, maybe we need to do some multiplication or something. Well, all we have to do is within an action, let's do update. We're going to do update app state, update the counter that I just created. And what we could do now is set value. And there's this code expression option. So I use ChatGPT for pretty much every code expression. And what I do to get the code expression written is I just continuously write, like I write initially what I want. So for example, take the current counter value and multiply it by 5, right? And maybe it writes up like a traditional function. Then I'll say, write the shortest Dart expression possible. And it'll like
Oh yeah, that's
reduce
a
it
great idea.
down to, just like the most optimized small code.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easy, right? You just add an argument here. So I could do a counter initial value. So it's an integer of the app state, right? And then now all I have to do, let's make sure return type is integer. And I could just do, counter times 5, check errors. And instead of having to create a custom function for that, I could do whatever I want with the
Yeah.
expression here. So
yeah, and also this is not just in the action flow editor. Anywhere where we have the set from variable icon in your app, you can use a code expression. And so like literally in that, like if you go into that button, just like on your canvas, and you just go to the text field, it's like boom, you can put the code expression right there,
Yep.
So so yeah, super helpful, and offloads a lot of your custom functions. So that's cool.
Sure. For sure. And it's easy to copy too, right? That's the nice thing. I also find myself using like copy variable a ton.
Oh yeah.
Just
Oh
to
yeah.
move it around. So yeah,
And
that's
the compilation's faster too. That's
yes.
the other great thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to keep compiling the functions every time. Yep. So
well, because
yeah,
I think the idea is that you have all of these imports which are part of the compilation, but when you're just doing a small expression, uh, it's essentially just saying all you have are the functions and methods from Dart, and you can't reference any of these other libraries. So I mean, I guess that's the good point. It's like if you don't need any of these other libraries and you can just use whatever you have in Dart, cool. You just put it in an expression.
Nice. Yeah, one thing I do want to add that actually reminded me of something. So sometimes in the code expression, right, you'll notice there's this eye icon. So make sure to take note of the hint here, right? Use math to access math functions. So sometimes if you're trying to use some more like advanced math calculations or functions, I guess, you'll need to put math dot before it, right? So I'm trying to think of a Dart function that I could use right now, but literally you would just type like math dot and then whatever the math function is. So
Yeah.
you don't need that for like multiplication, division, things like that. But again, this will come up if you're utilizing maybe ChatGPT to help you write the expression, and you could even include that, right? So maybe just add a note saying literally this, right? You could just copy this and include it in your request.
Yeah. Or you could say don't include any external libraries.
Exactly. Good,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
better. Yeah, that's a great call. So,
Cool,
so yeah,
cool.
that's expressions. Now we can actually jump into functions, right? So the powerful part of FlutterFlow is that code extensibility, right? You can add custom code into FlutterFlow just by writing the Dart code here, right? Would you consider this is Dart, right? Not Flutter. This is Dart code.
In the widgets, that's Flutter and Dart
Got it.
because
But then the
those
function
the
would be Dart.
that's pure Dart. Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Nice. Nice.
So
So
so what so one of the this is one of the things that I think a lot of developers when they hear no code or low code sort of like cringe a little bit. But this is one thing that I'm constantly harping on about is that we not only integrate with like custom code, but I like to describe it as an elegant integration, right? Where it's not just like you could think
nice.
about like if in a lot of platforms, if you just got a box and it's like, okay, you can inject whatever code you want, but it's not like integrated in any sort of elegant way. Whereas like this is an elegant integration because we not only have a code editor, you can save these functions, these widgets, you can reference them anywhere in your project. So it's not just saying, hey, people have asked for some custom code, so we're just going to use this black box. It will dump in at compile time. It's like no. We want to integrate this in so it's just like coding yourself in your editor.
Nice. Yeah. Like a literal embedded IDE, right? Like
Totally.
as if you're using Visual Studio Code or something like that.
Exactly.
So super
Yeah.
powerful. Super powerful. Yeah, just to jump into some of the functions, right? One of the first ones I want to showcase, this has been talked about many times throughout the FlutterFlow community, and it's the distance between 2 points, right? This is
Oh, got it.
essential if
Yeah.
you're doing something like filtering, or I know this is popular among like Tinder style swiping apps, right? You want specific documents within a range, or you want to showcase the distance between two things, restaurants, locations, whatever it is. And this is a custom function to do so. Now, this is
Can you
actually,
can you just zoom in on your screen maybe one or
yeah,
two times because
for sure.
we've had some comments about people being unable to see, so just make sure you can
Nice.
see this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And this function specifically is in miles, but you could most definitely just take this code, right? Copy it over, put it in ChatGPT, and say switch this function so it returns the value in kilometers or whatever distance you need here. And all it takes, right, are two arguments. So when you're creating a custom function, you want to add all the arguments that essentially are the parameters going into your function. So in this case, I have to pass position 1 and a position 2, and then this function is essentially taking those, doing a math calculation here to determine the result, which is the distance between those two latitudes and longitudes, right? So you can see the conversion actually happens here to miles. So this is actually probably the line you would change, line 26, to kilometers. And I think this is
Okay.
actually on the FlutterFlow marketplace, as well as in the community. If you just search like distance between 2 points. So this is one I've used a ton, and I can actually showcase what this does, right?
Oh, cool.
So maybe let's just do a random location. Let's do like, because I'm in New York, let's do Empire State Building.
Oh, you're doxing yourself.
And let's do What's another? Let's do stats.
Chicago.
Right. Perfect. Right. So hopefully when I click run, it works. So let's see here. Right. And there we go. So 2.6 miles apart.
That's
In this case,
cool.
I didn't add the miles, but it'd be easy to do that. I'd have to change the return type to a string.
Well,
But in this
but
case,
here's an even great example of like where like a code expression could be great, because one of the ideas is like in programming is that you write pure functions, is that they do one thing, right? And so this function is great, and then you're like, oh well, if I want to display this differently, write a
nice.
little just concatenation expression where I'm doing it. Whereas like because this is powerful for use for like filtering, like you said
For
too.
sure.
So it's like, oh no, maybe I want an int here, but I can display it as a string in this other place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Or like combined text. Combined text is
Mm,
a perfect example
yeah,
of doing that. Yeah. And so,
yeah. Don't
right.
even need an expression. What am I saying? I know
Sure.
FlutterFlow.
Yeah. Like the cool thing about this too is hopefully with the comments here, you'd be able to tell what's going on. Again, like at the end of the day, the only complex thing about this function is just the math calculation.
Yeah, yeah,
But beyond that, you'd be able to see, okay, the conversion to miles here, and then also rounding to one decimal. So I could say, okay,
yeah,
I want it to round to 3 decimals, right? And all I have to
yeah,
do
yeah,
is
yeah,
change this number to 3. So again,
yeah,
just phenomenal ways to inject custom code pretty easily into your FlutterFlow project, and use
yeah.
that throughout. And then you could save these as team functions if you're on a team plan or agency plan, right? Because then you could use it super easily across any project. You just click into the team actions or team functions and import it in.
I mean, I honestly use this all the time because I've got my API libraries that I'm constantly using, and I've just
Nice.
jumped that into my team. So anytime I need a project, I'm just like, oh, I need this API endpoint right here, and so I'm constantly using that.
Yeah. And I almost wonder like this, I said this was in the marketplace, but I kind of want to try it. If I were to add, let's give it a try, right? If I were to add point 1, let's see if the OpenAI Codex could even create this, just to show like the power of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
everything, right? So point 2, it's gonna be that long. Let's say that they're both gonna be. Let's say nothing is nullable for just the sake of this. And then I can go into OpenAI Codex. I'm gonna say distance for now. So find the distance between two.
All right, as you're writing there, you've got you got punctuation. I'm going to answer one question here. Kai asks, "Are we going to be able to have webhooks natively in FlutterFlow?" That's a good question, but the thing about that is that there's a sort of uh, because we are backend agnostic. That is to say, bring your own backend. There's all these companies that do backend work really well. The Typically the webhook is going to be with the backend provider because you're responding to some sort of event inside your backend. So when a record is updated or when a record is added. So if you're using Supabase, if you're using Firebase, you can do webhooks through them because essentially just a webhook is like some event is fired off and then you want to run some
Mm-hmm.
logic in response to it. Whereas like if that happens in an app, well, that's what we do with like the action flow editor. But if it's some other event, say, not when the user is there, maybe it's a cron event,
Yeah.
that's gonna be with with the backend provider. So yeah.
Yeah. And technically, you could do it in FlutterFlow. And we could even like that could be a perfect example of using the OpenAI codex. Like you could just say send the string parameter to the webhook, right? And it would do I'm assuming a post request to that webhook, right? And just
Mhm.
appending the string value to the end of that. But we could give that a try. But really, like it turns out maybe this wasn't maybe I didn't pull this from the marketplace because it essentially created that exact same function. If you look at it, right, it literally did conversion to miles and rounding to one decimal point just for me typing in find the distance between 2 points, right?
That's
So
sick.
really just encourage you to use the OpenAI codex. Just you can immediately see how powerful that was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
That
yeah,
feels
another one I
doesn't it
want to
feel
show you.
so good? Does it feel
What's up?
so good when you use like GPT for something and it just like works? You're like,
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
literal magic.
Yes. No, I totally agree. This is a perfect example of that. Like this next function, you can see literally what I typed in, right? Um, this is one that I use in a lot of apps as for like a dashboard, right? Instead of saying just the person's name in the top left or hello, their first name, I typically
Mhm.
use this just because I think it
Okay.
has more of a dynamic feature, right? Like
Yeah,
all
yeah,
I do
yeah.
is pass the timestamp of the current time, and then it detects, right? Is it morning, afternoon, or night? Maybe I don't want good night. I could say good evening, right? But
Good night.
but
They're like, you
a
gotta
good
close the app now.
exactly, exactly. And then what I typically do with this, I actually take it a step further. So I start with this um, to get the greeting, and then I'll do a combined text and get the person's name. And typically, the display name is their full name, right? Their first and last, or whatever. Maybe you're doing a username, but in my case, if I'm doing first and last names in the display name, then I'll use a custom function just to get the first string or the first word in that string, right? So then it
Mhm.
becomes, good afternoon, John, or good morning, Will. And all
Yeah.
I had to do for that was, right, quickly just write an OpenAI, return good morning if it's morning, afternoon if it's afternoon. It does the work
Yeah.
for me. And then I can search online or use ChatGPT to come up with the expression just to get the first word in the string.
Let me answer one question here. Daniel had a great question. I think he knows. I'm going to explain some stuff that I'm sure Daniel already knows, and then we'll get to the answer right here. So he says, is there a way to auto define the arguments from the code? That's a great question. The short answer right now is no, but there's an important caveat, and that is to say, when we're sending information to OpenAI's codex, we're sending the name of the function, the parameters, the return type, and then whatever we say in there. So like write a function that does X, Y, and Z. So we're sending 4 pieces of information and not just the prompt we give it. So um so so it can't auto do that because that's what we're giving over to
Mhm.
OpenAI. Now that's most of the time you're gonna know it's pretty obvious what you're going to need, and I know you know this, Daniel. Uh, you're gonna know what the function, what data needs to be passed into the function because, like I said, with like you're trying to write pure functions that it does like it does one sort of like simple task, right? It's not an app, right? Apps are broken up into different functions. It's one function. So it should be obvious, like in this, where it's like, oh, obviously you're passing in a longitude and a latitude value.
Mhm.
For Will's example here, oh, obviously we just need to know what time it is. So you should be able to do that. And if you don't know, once again, dump it into ChatGPT. Be like, hey, I'm trying to write this function. What
Yeah,
parameters should be passed in?
for
And then
sure.
just copy those in.
Nice. Yeah, and I wonder too if that'll be something. I think it's more of just like eliminating any potential errors or minimizing because I think like we could do it, right? Returning it in like a JSON format, but it's just at the end of the day, we want you to also like learn that, right? It's kind of
Well, so
essential.
yeah, and here's another good point. Like right now in the technology space, we're having to integrate with these LLMs with
Yeah.
ChatGPT, right? And part of the difficulty right now, or the challenge before us, is that we get the output that we get out of them is just like this fire hose of stuff. This is why OpenAI just released their functions feature where you can define precisely the data that's returned. And so this is something that we're all getting up to speed with and adapting our products to is because like for us, like we're returning this thing, and so we've got this whole system that the LMs need to insert itself into, right? So
Hmm.
these arguments, and it has to be the right form and all these things. And so um, this could very well be in the next year something that we do have, right?
Yeah,
Because we're currently everyone's creating new ways to be able to uh, like make specific the data that's coming out of the LLMs.
nice. Yeah. Yeah, that'll be really interesting just to see the evolution, right? Totally. And how it relates to like every industry, not even just this, right?
Oh yeah,
So
dude, I've been taught a couple of my friends I've been helping them with like LLM chatbot stuffs right now, and it's fun
yeah,
because it's like there are all of these industries that it's like anyone who's on this stream right now is pretty tech savvy person, and so this like ChatGPT is like old hat, but for most people it's like they
yeah.
kind of no
What a
idea, so
new
it's really
tool.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun to, and they say, hey, I've got a document, I need to do this, and I'm like, hold my beer. I get so jacked.
Yeah. I like one thing I found out the other day is you can actually get it to return. You can tell it to return the message in a JSON format. And typically, like I found almost every single time it does. So I've used that a lot of times for example, like I'll need content or information to pass directly to an API call, or I want it to return that so I can easily like parse the data. And now
Mm.
it's easy because I already know the format it's going to be returned in just by giving it like an easy JSON like mapping. And it's like, great,
Yeah.
turn it into JSON when it's returned, and write the JSON path, and away I go. With almost like 99% consistency there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I got a buddy, and he was trying to do some stuff with like Excel and tables and stuff, and I told him, I'm like, yo, it can return because it renders
yeah,
HTML, so it can return a table that you can literally copy and paste into. And I've done the same thing with this is one of my first sort of like aha moments where I needed some dummy data JSON, but I want to have a specific format. And so I said, hey, I need, you know, this object with these properties,
yeah,
and then I return something, and I'd be like, oh, change all the fruit properties to have this, and it's like so like so like rendering structured data is something that it's just like so awesome for.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, um, yeah. I'm excited for sure to see where everything moves. Um, but yeah, jumping. One question I do see that I want to answer, and we'll actually jump into this in a moment. You can utilize code snippets within the custom widgets to update Firestore values or update like local state values as well.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'll show you that. One of the examples, Dimitar, I don't know if he's on the live stream. Dimitar has a great video about
Mm-hmm.
integrating a rich text editor.
Mm.
And so I've used that in a couple projects, and that utilizes, you can pass in local state and update local state variables, but also update Firestore values as well, utilizing that custom widget. But
Yeah.
yeah, another custom function I just want to quickly showcase too is the standardized URL. And the reason I want to showcase
Oh,
this
this is
is
awesome.
this
Yeah.
is really important for standardizing your backend, like whatever you're using, right? Supabase, Firebase. A lot of people, I think, skip this step, and it can cause a lot of unnecessary issues in the future, right? So if you're utilizing this URL, right, sometimes you need it to be in a specific format every single time. For example, if you're using an HTML like web viewer, right, or launching the
Oh,
URL,
yeah, that's a great point.
right? Um, so this is another one where I just typed into OpenAI Codex, like I want to standardize a URL by removing any prefixes and any backslashes at the end. And you can see it kind of did everything for me, right? Removing any white spaces that someone maybe accidentally hits the space bar before and after. Um, everything's lowercase just to standardize the URL structure. It removes the www dot if it's present, right? Make sure the URL is secure by adding HTTPS at the beginning. So you can kind of see, right, it validates the URL. It removes the trailing slash. So I've used this across a ton of different projects just because, again, like another example would be calling APIs. So I've used URLs in the backend to call APIs and pass specific URLs to that API. Well, I need a standardized URL in order to do that. So that's when I utilize this function.
I love this because it's such like good dirty work, right? where it's like URLs are just like dirty things. They've got all this garbage attached to them, and you're like, this is this is just such a perfect example of like, I gotta clean up some URLs. Be like, boom, this is like shovel.
Yep.
Yeah. And I love it.
And this is something I would like. This is a perfect example of the difference between maybe a custom function versus a expression as well. Like this wouldn't work as a expression from my understanding, right?
No. Because an expression is one evaluated statement, right? Yep. So it would be like this would be, however many is in here, like 8 expressions. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is just to showcase like a differentiator. But yeah, now I kind of want to jump into custom widgets. So I have 3 here. This is where it gets a little bit more complex, right? This is where you need to utilize those repository sites, right? So one of those would be like pub.dev. That is like the go-to, right, the site for finding custom widgets in Flutter. And I think, like, personally, John, I'd love your opinion on this. So I think there's a strategic way to go about finding widgets to add into FlutterFlow, because I think a lot of people just go to pub.dev, they search up a widget and they see one and they're like, okay, this is like exactly what I want. Perfect, like ready to go. It's just going to magically like work in my platform. And I would say a good 50% of the time it takes, a little bit more time because it is a complex widget, right? Like you got to remember you're writing or importing, a full Flutter and Dart code. So this isn't something where it's as easy most of the time as just like tossing it in, right? Copying code and pasting it in. It does require some setup, and sometimes you are limited by the FlutterFlow editor. And I say that because you can't just like jump into other code files when you're using the FlutterFlow editor. You might have to export that code and add the function after.
Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, and in short, it's like you want to look at a package that is, like updated regularly and one that has a lot of points, right? So just people use a lot. It's just been battle tested. For sure.
Nice. So
because the other thing, sorry, one last thing is that it's Flutter and Dart are constantly being updated, right? So these are cutting edge technologies, and so the whole ecosystem is on the same boat together, and so it's like we got to keep everything updated. So whatever downside there is, and I mean there obviously is that you got to do some due diligence. It's because this is a fastly evolving space,
Yep. Yeah, that's a perfect way to describe it. And important to realize, right? Like some of the custom widgets on the marketplace right now haven't been updated. And because they haven't been updated, you got to remember we've gone through 2 updates of Flutter as a language, right? So some of those packages are extremely outdated because we've made so many improvements in the language and they just haven't stayed updated. So that's something to always keep in mind. Like always go back, try to update your custom widgets if you're utilizing those too.
Well, and the funny thing is like it could be because maybe that feature because the whole idea of a library is that it's like, oh, you want to do something that the framework currently doesn't support, right? Yeah. Like that's the whole idea. And so you're like, oh, it could be that like the framework now supports it, So you're like, oh, I don't even need this.
The custom, yeah. Or even in like FlutterFlow, for example, I remember originally we didn't have capitalization types in input fields.
Yeah,
So
great
when I
point.
was releasing like a production ready app, I would always have to export it, Control F, go through all the input fields and add like the sentence case addition to it.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. That's
so
awesome.
definitely the things we learned too from a FlutterFlow perspective, right? That
Yeah.
we want to add on. But yeah, so this custom widget is Flutter Linkify. You can just search it and it should pop up right on pub.dev. Love this one. This essentially finds, from my understanding, it finds links, auto detects links in text, right? So if
Mm.
I were to drag this in to a page, whoops, Flutter Linkify. Let's do like just now. And I could be typing something. Let's make the font size like 18, so you can see it. I were to type something here, right? I could say, "This is the best live stream ever. Make sure to tune in." And then I could do the FlutterFlow YouTube link, and there we go. Look
Oh
at that.
yeah, awesome.
Boom,
So it's
right?
so it's
This is
clickable. That's the
Yeah, it's
idea.
clickable
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your project. This is perfect for social apps. I've used this for different social apps that I've created. So now we have a clickable link, and you can customize everything that it looks like. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see I can change the link style and the
Oh,
text
that's
style.
cool. Yeah.
So I
And
could change
also,
colors.
like these are properties that you could expose in the
Yep.
widget definition itself.
That's a great point too, right? I could add more parameters. Right now I just have text and font size, but I could add text color and link color.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
Um,
That's cool.
so in this case, I actually just made it so it's the primary color of and the text color, I'm pretty sure. So I could even go in here and say, okay, let's make everything like,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. That's sick.
like let's make it green and the text like a blue, like make it kind of really ugly looking. I might have to. Oh, I'd have to recompile it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's one of the things I love is that ability. I guess first thing, right, is that technically what we did here was write custom code, and now we're seeing it in the editor, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Again, it's not updated because I haven't recompiled it, so it doesn't
Right,
know
right.
colors changed. But this is awesome because I can use this throughout my entire app in the FlutterFlow builder without having to like export the code and add anything there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely one I love using and would recommend searching if you're creating any sort of like social app.
And great for web too, like
Yes.
we're constantly working on improving the web app experience, and
Yeah.
this is great for that.
Nice. Yeah. So that's Flutter Linkify. Would definitely recommend it. Another one. This was actually one I created myself. Now, I
Ooh.
there's still some issues here and there I'm working on,
Yeah.
and this is what it does. I'm going to describe it for you. This one I'm actually pretty proud of.
Yeah, yeah.
I was trying to create a link previewer
Okay.
for a social app, right? Like similar to Twitter or whatever you're using. Um, it's a link previewer. So you would put in a
So
website link.
is the idea like when you put something on Twitter, it'll pull in the open graph images? Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And so there's pros to this strategy that I've taken for this link preview and cons, right? The
Okay.
pro is what I'm doing is actually getting the HTML from the page, the header,
Oh, dang.
and then I'm parsing it for the specific info, right? So I'm actually
Oh,
parsing it.
yeah.
I'm fetching the
That's pretty
URL,
sick.
right? I'm fetching the URL, parsing the data, parsing the
Yeah.
body of the URL, and
Yeah.
looking for things like the metadata, so the description and the image, which
That's that's pretty sick.
thanks. And this was all created with ChatGPT, a couple iterations, right? I asked it
Yeah.
to parse the data, and then I went in and kind of customized the way the container looks. So you could
Yeah.
customize all the code here, but let me show you what that actually looks like. So I'm going to delete the Flutter Linkify. Now I'm going to drag in the link previewer. So obviously right now, let's make it like 200, or let's do 300. 200, and let's do, this is one that I know works, so that's why I'm going to do it. Raycast? I think it's Raycast. Okay. And let's see what happens here. Hopefully it works. I might have to, oh, it's raycast.com. Let's update it. Oh, okay. So,
Oh, sick.
right, it kind of,
That's very cool.
it's kind of working, right? So I would need to do
Yeah.
a couple things, right? I think like right now I have it the same color as, yeah, I don't have a background color to it, the
Okay.
container. So maybe I'd want to like wrap this in a, right?
Yeah.
Wrap this in a container and add a color to it or something.
Yeah.
But lots of improvements could be made, it seems.
That's sick.
But yeah, so I'm gonna work on this a little bit more and try to release it personally, because I think
Yeah.
it's just, it could be a cool use case for different people, right?
Yeah.
Oh, in this case, I think it's dependent on actually the colors I have here, light mode or dark mode. So yeah,
Daniel's asking, is this what you use for your Google Drive clone?
this is not what I'm using for the Google Drive clone. I'm actually using no custom widgets in that. That's all native Flutter widgets. So I'll probably release that to the marketplace pretty soon, which should be a fun one.
Yeah, and Google's scared. Isn't that right? You got
it. Yes. Oh, so you can see, here's the issue. I think I actually don't even have, yeah. So this is a little outdated since we've updated the text. So I would need to update like the text styles here, right? To match
got it. Okay.
theme, and I could add the background color to the container. But yeah, like a perfect example of just adding some custom code to do what you need, right? Like, here we go.
Yeah.
This is going to be the test. Let's see if FlutterFlow.com or FlutterFlow.io works. I don't know if
oh man,
pressure might be on.
Let's see.
Ooh, see.
Wait, is it .com or .io?
I did .io, but
okay.
Yeah.
No. I thought you said com.
I don't think it works, at least the way I have it set up for FlutterFlow.
I know we have those set, so it's.
Yeah, it's something, again, like still a work in progress widget.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Your custom code doesn't work the first time? That's not how that works for you?
Uh-huh. So yeah, you can see like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But
work in progress.
So I'm still working on like an actual solution to this. But again, it's like kind of cool playing around with
totally cool
functions, custom widgets, right?
Well, and that's like pretty complicated, where you're like literally grabbing the HTML and parsing it, Yeah.
Definitely a better solution, I'm sure, out there. And I know for a fact there's other pub dev packages to do this exact same thing. But yeah,
that's great.
Just wanted to give it a try.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then one other one, again, I want to shout out Dimitar for this. He has a YouTube video reviewing this, how to use it. So this is essentially a rich text editor, and I've actually customized it. You can customize it with different options here, like the hint text, the initial text that's passed, if spell check is on, etc. The type of toolbar, so you can kind of customize what it actually looks like, and the separators, the height of it. And you can see this is what I really wanted to showcase, that ability to update Firebase or local states.
Oh, that's sweet.
So what this is doing is there's actually a button added, and I'll render this really fast so you can see it. There's a button added, and you can technically save to Firebase, or you could update the local app state as well. You can see what that save post button does, right? It triggers that unpressed option.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So it is possible. And again, like I would check out Dimitar's video if you just search rich HTML text editor. FlutterFlow on YouTube. It should be one of the
Yeah.
earlier options. But let me render
I
this.
want to see this.
So I'm gonna do like an iPad view. Let's do 600 by 500. Let's do my current HTML. I'll do like each one. Oh, welcome to the. Oh, that was weird. Check that out. I didn't know it makes a down arrow. See that?
Wait, am I?
That's crazy. Huh. Slash. That's wild. I didn't know that. That might be a bug. I might have to check on that. A backslash and then like your typical to end the the header.
Yeah.
Actually creates this down arrow.
Oh, okay.
That weird. Maybe I'll just leave this blank for now. But let me run it real quick. Or is it required? Ooh, might be required. So the way this widget works, again, like I'm just doing this really fast, so I'll share the test in a moment. But the way this custom widget works, you can store HTML value in an app state or page state, and then actually pass it to this HTML editor when you're viewing it. So I've used this
that's awesome.
for a few different projects as well, right? It's kind of a cool addition. This is something I think actually would be cool to add to FlutterFlow. Like a native rich text edit.
Yeah, I would. I want to answer one question here. Colin asks how to pass a result from a custom widget to another page. So a couple of things going on here. So like the short answer is you can access in custom widgets, like he's showing here, your backend or your or local state variables through the app state. The other thing is if you're like widgets aren't really meant for like passing information between pages. Yeah. So just by the way that you're asking me the question, there's probably a better way to do that. So typically you'd want to do that with a custom action because the idea of actions is that you're executing some logic. The idea of widgets. Now these are overlapping categories, but the idea of a widget is that this is something that is displayed on the page. So it's a visual element. And an action is something that you execute. So navigating over here, sending data over here, clicking a button, running an animation, executing some sort of logic. So I would look, and then also the other thing is, is that when you're trying to do something, a lot of times there's multiple ways to do it, especially in a powerful platform like FlutterFlow. And so it as a sort of like general rule, if you're like doing something and it seems like extremely complicated, there's probably a better way to do it, right? Yeah. Like if you're having to like hack away at this like custom widget to do something that doesn't seem very complicated, I would sort of step back and be like, all right, is there a better way to do this, or ask in the community or something like that, because 95% of the things that most of us are doing in apps, you can do in FlutterFlow using its like native features. So
yeah, nice. Yeah, I think like, again, this is something too where I would definitely go to the FlutterFlow community and like explore some of the solutions that people have done too. I think that's important, definitely to do when it comes to experimenting with these different types of implementation, right? Like exactly like you said, there's so many ways to implement different things. So like look around, right? Check on YouTube, check on the FlutterFlow docs, the blog, these live streams, Twitter, like definitely look around.
And if I could just make a plug for the FlutterFlow University that we're in the middle of putting out, that I'm doing, And because the idea is like you want to have a really good big picture overview of the platform and each of the components, because it's just going to help you to move faster. Because sometimes, like it's good to like jump in and just like start playing around, but to have, a sort of like formal progression where like you have a very good handle on every aspect, it's going to save you time, because then you realize, be like, oh, I don't do this in custom code. I can literally do this in the editor.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely check out FlutterFlow University. There's been videos daily, and they're all fantastic. And there's only more and more being released daily, right? So if you haven't started that, I would recommend going back to the beginning. Even if you've used FlutterFlow before, right?
For
Even if
sure.
you've used FlutterFlow for a while, it's always great because there are things that even using it for, I think I did the math the other day. I have over like 708 hours in FlutterFlow, right? I still have like first time used, like, I still haven't, I think, used all the Flutter widgets. I think there's a few I just haven't like used.
Yeah.
Like the card widget. I've never used the card widget before. I've always used containers. Or I'm sure there's like specific settings that I've just like haven't updated, right? So there's so many things
Yeah. I
to
mean, we're
check.
constant like on our internal Slack, like Will and I, you and I are constantly starting to be like, did you know you can do this? Did you know you can do
Yeah.
this? And everyone's like, no. And the other thing about the FlutterFlow University videos is that I try to do a couple different things. To your point, Will, about like, hey, even if you know it, I try to do, and
Yeah.
so it's not just pushing buttons and saying what the buttons do. It's also showing you examples and be like, okay, so here's a grid, but here's how designers and developers
Nice.
typically use this thing. So there's a lot of practical applications. So even if you're like, I know what grid does, just be like, yeah, yes, but these are sort of the design patterns that go along with it. And then we
Yep.
also go into sort of like internals of Flutter to give a better understanding. So we had video on like the number one layout thing to understand, or how a line widget is working under the hood, or like I call it like the widgets we've hidden from you. And so we talked. So like we really I really want to get into as simply as possible, but get into the really meat and potatoes. And so it's like I hate videos that are just like, when you push this button, this is what this does. So like
Yeah.
on our container video that I just did, literally in 30 seconds, I said, you can do all these background stylings, you can do it, play with it, so
Nice.
we can get on to like more important aspects. So definitely check those out.
Nice. Yeah, that's a that's so funny. Um, I'm on the exact same page. Like that is, I think, essential when you're like watching a tutorial video, right? Because it's all like it's okay if you're trying to get something really quick, but the whole point of FlutterFlow University is to truly understand
Yeah.
what FlutterFlow is, right? So, like obviously that those are key. Um, okay, I did get the rich text editor to work again. Obviously, I have some issues with like the container height and but this is what it looks like, right? I haven't added a background to it,
Oh
and
wait,
you can
you
actually
gotta share
adjust the
it.
height here. Oh, I gotta share the screen here. There we go. Um, so this is
Oh
what it looks
sweet.
like, right? I can adjust like the height here. I can minimize the top bar if I want. I could show it.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to make this text huge. I could do that, right? Just by clicking there. Awesome. Now we have header one text, right? And then normal. So you can see like all of the options here. It's pretty cool, right?
That's very cool. So can you is it so this is like rendering HTML or Markdown, or what is it doing?
To be honest with you, I don't know, in all
Okay.
honesty.
Interesting.
It's a, again, I know this is from PubDev, so this is a package. But I've used this. So for example, like there's a tutorial out right now to connect your site to WordPress. A couple actually. People have built like WordPress CMS
Oh,
managers
cool.
in FlutterFlow. And like
Yeah.
this is an example. Maybe you want to edit a blog in FlutterFlow and
Yeah.
not in WordPress. Just pull it over, edit the data, save it to, send it back via an API call or to Firebase. Um, so, so yeah,
Okay. That's so cool.
yeah.
Let me answer one other question.
Yeah.
Anime Cabin says he's got to leave FlutterFlow. He's been frustrated. I'm sorry to hear that, but if I can give you some places to look for support,
Yeah.
we've got a bunch to. So here he's saying he's trying to be able to separate data from each users. Okay, so what I would look into is we got a bunch of tutorials on. First, you need to make sure you've got user authentication set up, and you've got your database set up. And then we've got a bunch of data on how to display different users and passing data and stuff like this. What is there a go-to video you think that we've got? There's so many.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to understand the question, I guess. Not being able to separate data for each user. Is that like assigning data to a specific user? Or like
that's
what do
that's what
you
my guess is. So like if a user has a post, I think I
oh,
think it has to do with like how. So
yeah.
you need to make sure you have your backend set up correctly and that you've
Yep.
got user authentication. And I'm thinking, is there one video that we have that sort of covers all of that?
I mean, it's kind of tough because it's so right. It's so many things. That's like setting up the auth, setting up your back end, building out the collections. Really, I mean, I don't have a go-to video. I would look at the FlutterFlow community as well as some of the marketplace templates. All of the FlutterFlow templates, like project templates, also have this implemented. All you would need to
Yeah,
do is add, like, create a new collection or a table, depending on your backend, and just have like
yeah,
a user reference option, right? To
yeah,
just
yeah,
point
yeah.
back to the user who owns that data. Then you can filter it at any point, and that data will kind of be assigned. Or if you're using Firebase, you could create a sub collection under a user.
Yeah,
Again, it's not as like quote unquote easy as it might sound because it depends on so many things, right? What you're storing, what your database
yeah.
you're using, right? It's not just like
Right,
John owns the video now, right? Like that could
right.
mean so many different things.
So I would look at if you're using Supabase, the Supabase auth video will show you how to set up users and then display data from users. Um, and then if you just look for Firebase, I think it's just the Firebase authentication video shows you how to set that up and how to display data with each user. So check those out. And we'd love
Awesome,
for you to stay. You
for
can
sure.
reach out to the community or Will or
Yep.
I on Twitter. We'd be happy
Yep.
to help you out.
For sure. And there's a bunch of FlutterFlow support communities out there too. So if you're having an issue with FlutterFlow support specifically, check those out, right? Ideally, you'd get immediate. I mean, these are just people that love FlutterFlow and are,
Yeah,
chatting about FlutterFlow all the time. So,
for sure, for sure.
well, John, this was awesome.
Yeah,
This was great. Tuning in, we had a pretty decent crowd, and it was fun chatting about the custom code. Right, we got to see how you can easily extend FlutterFlow, not only from like the typical widgets, but we added a rich text editor, a broken link preview widget, right? A link detector. So all things that you could just easily, one click add to your project, which is pretty
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Check out every day. We got FlutterFlow University videos coming out, and we'll see you on the next stream.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.